Senate committee has approved in principle 150 peso across-the-board minimum wage increase. Will it come to pass? Heads up, consumers expect higher electricity bills for the month of May. And President Bongbong Marcos says the South China Sea should not be a nexus for armed conflict. Fast, focused, and fearless. Here's a roundup of stories we're watching now. I'm Sean Yao. The Senate Labor Panel has approved in principle the proposed 150 peso across-the-board wage hike. The bill is backed by no less than Senate President Mig Zubiri, who hopes that the private sector would support the measure. Zubiri noted that the last time the legislature moved to increase salaries of workers was back in 1989.
Nakita ko po sa aking sariling mga mata kung gaano ka hirap ang dinadaanan ng ating mga manggagawa at kung gaano kaliit ang pagtaas na kanilang sweldo. Kawawang-kawawa po ang ating mga kapatid na hindi po makaramdam ng disenteng buhay dahil sa napakababang wages.
On the other hand, the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP, finds that the move would lead to the closure of small businesses as they will not be able to keep up with the increase. The group is urging lawmakers to consult with different concerned agencies first before making such a move.
May kaya siguro yung medium tsaka yung large, mga 2% lang yun. Marami rin yun, libo rin yun, pero 2% lang yun. Paano na yung mga maliliit enterprises?
In other news, the Philippine economy expanded in the first quarter of 2023, albeit at a slower pace of 6.4%. This is slower than the 7.1% growth in the previous quarter and likewise lower than the 8% growth from the same period last year. It is also the slowest growth rate in 7 quarters, but still well within the government's target of 6 to 7% growth for the year. The Philippine Statistics Authority said main contributors to GDP in the first 3 months of 2023 include wholesale and retail trade, repairs, and other services. And despite the slower expansion, NEDA Secretary Arsenio Balisacan says the Philippines is returning to its high growth trajectory.
While this quarter's growth figure is lower than the 8.0% year-on-year growth rate recorded in the first quarter of 2022, we need to exercise caution in interpreting this as a slowdown since the previous year's growth came from a low base. Rather, the economy is normalizing its previous trend. The better-than-expected first quarter performance this year implies that we are returning to our high growth trajectory despite the various challenges and headwinds we have faced.
And Meralco customers should expect their monthly electricity bills to go up this month following an increase in generation charges. Gerard De La Peña with the details.
Mary Jane endures the summer heat by fanning herself while manning a sari-sari store in Pasig. She says it's not as hot compared to the previous days, the reason she opted to turn off her electric fan. She admitted though that she also does this to reduce her electricity consumption.
Nagtitipid po sa kuryente. Bakit po? Mataas na po ang bill.
But it looks like this is how Mary Jane will be in the coming weeks. As Meralco announced a power rate hike for May, the power distributor said there will be an increase of almost 18 centavo per kilowatt hour to its rate. This translates to a 35 peso increase in bills of households consuming 200 kilowatt hours per month. Meralco said the high demand and low supply pushed the generation charges up, which ultimately prompted the wholesale electricity spot market, or WESM, the source of about 18% of Meralco supply, to increase its charges. Meanwhile, electricity coming from power supply agreements, which contributes to to about half of Meralco's total supply, became much more expensive due to the weakening of the peso against the dollar. These increases were tempered by the reduction of charges from independent power producers, which contribute 35% to Meralco supply. This is after First Gas, Santa Rita, and San Lorenzo went back online after their scheduled maintenance activities. Meralco also said electricity is normally much more expensive from March to June, and that this year's power demand is higher compared to last year's.
It also includes yung recovery nung ating economic activity from the time the pandemic. Nakikita na natin more or less yung pagsipa ng demand sa Luzon, no? I would assume actually it's nationwide. And together with rising temperatures.
But another power rate hike of 87 centavos per kilowatt hour is likely in June as the distribution rate true-up refunds end this month. It doesn't stop here though, as power rate hikes could still persist due to the looming El Nino.
Kung matuloy yung El Nino, depending on its severity, pwedeng mataas pa rin ang temperature, which will affect consumption or the demand side of the equation, and then pwedeng affected yung hydro plants with less rainfall, which will affect the supply side naman ng equation.
Meralco, however, assures customers that the entire industry is doing everything they can to avoid any interruption in power services. For News 5, Gerard De La Peña, we are One News.
We're bringing you more stories after this quick break. Keep it here on One News. I'm Sean Yao. President Bongbong Marcos has renewed his call for a speedy finalization of the Code of Conduct for the South China Sea. Speaking at the 42nd ASEAN Summit, Marcos Jr. seemed to be puzzled as to why the code is still not complete, despite decades of negotiations. The president believes that maritime rows in the disputed waters will not stop unless a code of conduct is in place. The president also committed to the enforcement of the Declaration of the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea. This was a pact signed by China and members of the ASEAN in Phnom Penh back in 2002, which reaffirms freedom of navigation and overflight in the area. Aside from the Philippines and China, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, Brunei, and Taiwan all have claims in the strategic waterway. A title holder of many firsts, she aims to elevate Filipino and Asian American representation in the pageant world. Miss Universe 2022 Arboni Gabriel caught up with Kathy Yang just before she boarded her flight to Manila, her first return to the Philippines in 5 years. Here's an excerpt of that conversation.
She's a title holder of many firsts and aims to elevate Filipino and Asian American representation in the pageant world. She is the first Filipino American to win both Miss USA and Miss Universe, and she is the CEO of her own sustainable clothing line. Joining us now in New York for Thought Leaders, please welcome Miss Arboni Gabriel. Good to see you, Arboni. How is it going?
Hello, thank you for having me. It's going well here in New York.
Well, how are you feeling ahead of your Philippine visit? We're all looking forward to that. You're the special guest of the Miss Universe Philippines 2023 Coronation Night.
I am really looking forward to it as well. This is going to be a very special trip. I've been waiting for this to happen, so I'm looking forward to it. I'm very excited about it. I haven't been to the Philippines since 2018, so to come back now as Miss Universe, I know will be such a special experience.
5 years, that's a long time for you not to get back here, and you'll get your fill of ensamadas for sure, your favorite Filipino pastry.
My favorite.
Yeah, you know your dad, Remigio R. Bonzon, often took you on trips back to the Philippines, if I'm not mistaken. What has he said about his roots here and how his journey took him to the U.S.?
My father tells me of growing up with his 7 siblings in Manila, Philippines all the time. And, you know, he grew up in church, and that really opened up a world of opportunities. And that's where he was actually had an opportunity of a scholarship. Somebody in church told him about a scholarship to come to America. And my dad was very studious. He was very hardworking, and he was very observant, he said, growing up. So when he found this opportunity for the scholarship, he went full force for it, and that was kind of his ticket into America. He was the first one of his whole family to do so, and that opened the door for his other siblings to come and other people in his family to come to America and just to build that life and, you know, to work hard and work towards the American dream.
And his closest to the church also is something that he brought to the U.S. because your dad and your mom, Dana, got married here in the Philippines.
That was Miss Universe 2022, Arboni Gabriel, speaking to Kathy Yan. Catch the full interview on Thought Leaders on May 16, Tuesday, here on One News. One News Now will be back tomorrow at 7 a.m. I'm Sean Yao. We are One News. All sides, all the time.